Hailing from the great cold state of Alaska, I am the Frozen Gamer, and tonight I want to give you guys my predictions for the upcoming Nintendo Direct. Now, it's not absolutely confirmed yet that there is one happening, but it does look like there's a good chance that on the 27th of February we'll be having one. If not, these predictions will still basically apply for whenever the next one is. So I'm going to start off with some realistic predictions, some things that I think are pretty much guaranteed to be at the Direct. Whether or not they're something that are necessarily like big things, really most of these are fairly small, fairly obvious things, but some of them I think are maybe a little more surprising to some people, and those that aren't necessarily surprising, well, I just want to, like I said, put these as realistic predictions, and later on I'll get into wishful things as well as things that are unrealistic, unlikely, or potentially even impossible. So starting with my realistic predictions, I think we're going to get a port of Pikmin 3 from the Wii U. I'd say that's pretty much guaranteed. There have been rumors going around about that for quite a while, and it's one of the Wii U games that just has not quite made its way over yet to the Switch. So the chances of this happening are just very, very high. I think that there's a very good chance that we'll see it in some form or another. Now, it is technically possible that this is something that'll just be shown later in the year, but I definitely think that the chances are much higher that it's going to be shown in this Direct. Additionally, I do think that Super Mario 3D World could be shown in this Direct. That's another one, once again, a Wii U game that needs to be ported over. And it's one of the last few first-party games that Nintendo has to port over. So I think that there's a fairly solid chance that they'll do that. And considering the fact that we currently don't actually have any new Mario games scheduled for this year, I think that's bringing over a port of what is definitely a great game makes perfect sense. Then another thing that I think is pretty much absolutely guaranteed, especially based on the fact that it has received a rating already, Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition is going to get a release date. I don't know exactly when that's going to be. My guess is probably spring, so like maybe around May, I think is most likely, but they may push it back to summer. It's kind of hard to say for sure. Either way, I think that getting a release date is pretty much guaranteed. And of course, it's an excellent game, at least in the previous versions, so getting this version on Switch is going to be really, really nice. I will say, on a similar note, Xenoblade Chronicles X, I do not believe is going to be revealed yet. I think that most likely they're going to wait and do a port of that next year. Either that or sometime after the definitive edition of Xenoblade Chronicles releases. And the major reason I think that they would do this is because of the fact that they don't want to overload people with Xenoblade. Especially because if they release them too close together, people will probably just decide to play one or the other and not both. And they want to get people to play both because they're for very different audiences, I believe. Xenoblade Chronicles is very story-driven, very character-driven, very excellent game in its own right. I played it on new 3DS and I absolutely loved it, so much more than I expected to, which was great because that was the main reason I got a new 3DS. But I do think that X, which is my personal favorite of the three main games, excluding Torna, which is technically just DLC for Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Between Chronicles X and Chronicles 2, X is my personal favorite. And then, in addition to that, I do think that we're probably going to get a release window for No More Heroes 3. It's possible we could get a release date, but I think it's much more likely that we'll get a release window. And my guess is that that's probably going to be like either an August or a September game. But I do think that along with that, they're going to reveal that the first two No More Heroes games, which were originally on Wii, and the first one later got ported to PS3, I do believe that those games are going to get ported over to Switch. Now, hopefully, they will take the best elements of the PS3 HD remaster and the areas where apparently it was better on the Wii version to make it work better for the Switch. But either way, those are great games. I personally kind of like the first one better, even though the open world is pretty janky. But either way, I do think that those games would be great to have on Switch, and I'm hoping that those will get revealed at the same time as No More Heroes 3. And I think that it would make a good sense to do that, because, bring those over first, then release No More Heroes 3, and then people can play all of them back to back, or thereabouts. Now, something that comes with a third-party announcement that I think is pretty realistic is the Assassin's Creed Ezio Collection. Now, I personally have never played any of those earlier Assassin's Creed games. The first one I played was 3, and even that I barely played. It wasn't really until I played Black Flag that I really got into any of the games, and after that I played Origins, which I actually just completed doing absolutely everything. Well, I should say I got every achievement on the Steam version anyway. And I think that the Ezio Collection will probably come over, because they've already brought over 3, they've already brought over 4, they've already brought over Rogue, and if they're going to try and sell people some of the Assassin's Creed games that'll definitely run on Switch, the Ezio Collection makes the most sense. Personally, I'm not sure if I would pick that up, because I'm afraid that some of the gameplay elements might make it feel a little too much like I'm going backwards, And Black Flag was super good. 3 had some elements that I liked, but it was really hard to get into, and Rogue, from the little bit that I've played, actually took elements from Black Flag and improved upon them, but I just hadn't gotten into it because it was a little too much of essentially exactly the same gameplay as Black Flag, and I just put like 100 hours into Black Flag. So I would definitely say that I think the Ezio Collection is coming. I'm not sure exactly when. I'm going to guess it's probably going to be, I'll say early December game would be my guess. Well, actually, now that I think about it, Assassin's Creed 3 came out last spring, if I remember correctly. So, no, I think that the Ezio Collection will come out in the spring. I would say that's probably pretty likely. I think the only reason why the Rogue, or what was it they called it? The Rebel Collection, which was Black Flag and Rogue, the only reason that came out in December was because of the fact that they released 3 earlier in the year. The other thing that I think is pretty much guaranteed to be revealed is the Bioshock Collection. And this is based on the fact that there was some listings for it, and I believe it was same was true for a Metro Redux Collection. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. I don't really remember specifically on the Metro Collection, and I'm not someone who plays those games, so I don't care as much. But the Bioshock Collection, those are all great games. I think my personal favorites, I think 1 is my favorite overall, at least in terms of the story and the setting and everything. Definitely not in terms of visuals, and the controls are probably the weakest. But it was also the first game. I think they did improve on it with the HD version, or the remaster, in making it so that instead of having to press a button to swap between the weapons and plasmids, you could just press the right or left trigger, which is basically what they have in 2 and Infinite. But anyway, the first Bioshock was my favorite of the 3. Infinite was right after that. But I think that 2 actually had the best controls of the 3 games. I felt like it took the best of 1 for the most part, with the exception of the story being a bit weaker. And then had the the better controls that Infinite also has. And yeah, so I do think the Bioshock Collection is going to be revealed, probably along with, well, maybe with the Metro thing. Probably not Metro, since that was already announced on their Twitter page. But since Bioshock has not been announced yet for Switch, I would say that it's pretty much guaranteed to be shown at this first Direct of 2020. So let's get into my wishful predictions. These are things that basically I would say are not, are things that will probably happen eventually, but may or may not actually be revealed anytime soon. And in fact, some of them, I would say basically all of them, well, most of them are things that I would like to see that may not necessarily be revealed at this Direct. So the first thing, above all else, is the fabled Metroid Prime Trilogy HD Collection. And I recognize that, it seems almost like it doesn't actually exist because, Nintendo could have revealed it a long time ago, apparently. I guess it's been done for a while, according to some reliable resources, but they haven't revealed it, probably in large part because Prime 4 has been so far off. But I'm hoping that they'll actually reveal it in this Direct. The big thing for me, the visuals, you can look online and find HD versions of those games that's basically just, improving the resolution for the textures, and they look fine. The big thing for me is seeing what they do with the controls. I don't know if they're going to do something more akin to GameCube controls, or more akin to the Wii controls, or something more along the lines of like most first-person shooters on the Switch, where you have the gyro aiming as part of it. And they may even do all three. I think that would be the smartest thing for them to do. It would be extra work, but it would make a lot of people happy, because some people just want to play it as it was on the GameCube, at least with the first two games. And personally, I like the motion controls. I really liked it especially for playing 2 and 3, because I played both of those, or rather, I completed both of those on the Wii, whereas I did 1 entirely on the GameCube. I played a bunch of 2 on the GameCube, but got stuck at, I think the Spider Ball boss was probably the one where I got stuck. And then eventually, since I had the Trilogy, I went ahead and played through 2 entirely on the Wii version, finished that, and then played through 3 after that. But I do think that, obviously this Trilogy, it's going to happen. It's just a question of whether it's going to happen, it's going to be shown soon, or if it's something that they're just going to keep pushing off until they get closer to the point of actually being able to reveal Metroid Prime 4 and have some sort of release date, have enough progress to actually be able to give us more than just a logo. In addition to that, but going along the same theme, is the rumored 2D Metroid game. Apparently it's potentially either a remake of Fusion or a sequel to Fusion, perhaps, which would mean that it would be the furthest in the timeline for Metroid. I would be very interested in that, because I'm a big fan of the 2D Metroid games. Fusion is definitely my least favorite. Well, other than the original Metroid, which just doesn't hold up well in many ways. But Zero Mission is so good that that's the way I really played the original, in a sense, is playing the remake. But yeah, I would really like to see that, and I love Super Metroid. Samus Returns was great. I even like Metroid 2 on the Game Boy, for the most part. There's definitely, the fact that it doesn't have a map sucks, and it's very samey, the environments are and everything, but what I played of it, I still thought it was really good, and it was really fun, and it definitely made some massive improvements over the original Metroid. Really just the remake that they did for 3DS was really, really excellent, and I had a great time with it. Now, going further into my wishful predictions, we'll get some third-party things. One of those is the Batman Arkham games. Now, it's hard to say whether or not Arkham Knight could be included in that, because Arkham Knight, as it is, really pushed the PS4 and Xbox One in many ways. I mean, it is still a great looking game. I played it on PC, what was that? I guess about a year and a half ago? Yeah, because it was... I played through all the Arkham games back to back, just after my father passed away, and so it was Arkham Knight ended up actually it just looks so good. It really, really does. It doesn't run the greatest because it's optimized more for AMD, I guess, at least according to Digital Foundry, than it is for Nvidia, despite having the logo pop up at the beginning say Nvidia, the way it's meant to be played. But I digress. I don't think Arkham Knight would be included in that as much as I want it to be. I do think it's doable if they, got a studio who is willing to put in the work. It's not going to be Rocksteady, obviously, working on it. But I do think it's doable. I would like to see them bring over, at the very least, Arkham Asylum and Arkham City. I think Arkham Origins could be brought over, and I think that would be good as well. The game's actually better than it seemed back in the day. At least having played them all back to back when I did. But at the very least, Arkham Asylum and Arkham City, because they're excellent games, and they appeal to kind of two different styles of third-person 3D Metroid. Actually, I guess you really can only have third-person 3D. It has to be 3D. Anyway, so the point is that I do think that the Batman Arkham series, I think that can come over. It's more of a wishful thing of thinking that it will be shown at this Direct, or for that matter, that it even necessarily will come over. But even if they do the first two games, and leave out Origins and leave out Night, which I wish they would just do all of them. I do think that it could come over. It would be doable, because there have been other things that have been have proven that the Switch can do more than we thought, with the developer willing to put in the effort. But I would still say, yeah, it's more of a wishful prediction. In addition to that, I also think the Final Fantasy XIII Trilogy could come over, and that is definitely more of a wishful kind of thing. I know I'm in the minority on this. I actually liked 13. I don't think it was a great Final Fantasy, but I did think it was a good, solid game, and I still enjoyed it. I thought the combat was really good. Visually, it still looks great in many ways, despite being a PS3 game. And 13-2, I only played, I want to say probably like 6 to 10 hours of it. One of these days I actually have to go back and start it over from scratch, because I don't remember much of anything, and I think that I would really need to do that in order to get the most out of it. And then I have not played the third game at all. But even though those are not exactly popular with most people, I personally like them, and I think that, as a wishful prediction, I'd like to see it revealed for Switch. I think it's more wishful probably in terms of whether or not they would show it at this Direct than whether or not it could come over, because I do think it could. But Square Enix has sometimes kind of had their heads up their butts, so it's a little hard to say. But at the same time, they've also released 7, 8 as a remaster, 9, and the 10 2 remasters, and the 12 remaster. I'd say that it's definitely a possibility. It's more a question of when than if, in my opinion. But even so, I don't think they'll show it at this Direct. I would like them to. And this one is going to seem a little more out there for those of you who are not familiar with some of the rumors going around. But I would imagine probably most of you would be, that the Halo, there could be some Halo games coming over to Switch. and because of the partnership that Microsoft and Nintendo have had going on more recently, I think that most likely it would be the Master Chief Collection that would actually do it. And that might mean that they do like one game at a time, like what they've been doing with PC. But even if that's the case, that still could be really good. And I think that those games would be pretty cool to play on Switch. I've only ever played all the way through the original Halo on PC, and I enjoyed it a lot. It actually is what kind of convinced me Bungie was cool, I guess you could say. And then obviously, I got into Destiny later, but even so, I think it would be really cool. I don't know for sure if it would necessarily be something I would buy, just because I have a little less patience for some of those games, even though the gunplay is really good. And I think also because of the fact that, like, I know the gunplay is good, and that Bungie is really good at making games that the guns feel good, but I already have Destiny 2, so if I really want to play that type of game, I'll probably just play Destiny 2. Yeah. Now I want to get into some more unrealistic / unlikely and potentially even impossible predictions that I think could, or I would love to see happen at least, for Switch. Now the first of those is going to be Persona 5 Royal. I know. I mean, I talked previously about thinking that we were going to get Persona 5 on Switch. It did not happen. Atlus definitely does not seem to have the best decisions in mind. And even if it was something that was going to happen, it probably would not be revealed before the PS4 version comes out. I don't think that they would be... I don't think they would have that little foresight. I think that they would realize that it would hurt the PS4 sales to reveal a Switch version. And, I mean, people, like, pretty much anyone who's played the Persona games, especially those who've played some of the portable versions like Persona 4 Golden, know that that game is just perfect for a handheld. It is. And if they reveal Persona 5 Royal for the Switch, I mean, the PS4 version is not going to sell anywhere near as well. People will buy Persona again just to play it on the go. I have no doubts about that whatsoever. And Persona 5 Royal on the Switch would convince me to buy it, because right now, as it is, I just replayed Persona 5 late last year to get the Platinum Trophy, and I love the game. I don't feel like I need to get Royal anytime soon. And of course, the possibility of it coming to Switch makes it even more so something that I'm not motivated to get. But I do think that it would be perfect if it did, and as unrealistic as it is, I'm still going to predict it as one of my out there predictions. The next thing is Red Dead Redemption 2. Now, I had previously predicted that Red Dead Redemption 1 would come over to Switch. I'd say pretty much that's never going to happen at this point. They haven't even brought Red Dead Redemption 1 over to PC. They haven't brought GTA 5 over like I had previously predicted. And so at this point, I think that if they're going to bring over something, it's going to be Red Dead Redemption 2. I just think that it's too late for them to bring over anything else. And that one, it's going to be a challenge. But you put it in the hands of the right developers, I think it could absolutely happen. It's just putting it in the right hands. I mean, it's not going to run anywhere near as well. Like, I've heard it doesn't even run that great on PS4 and Xbox One, and that, there's some input lag and things like that. But I still think that this could happen. I mean, I know The Witcher 3 is definitely doesn't look as good as Red Dead Redemption 2, but still, they did bring it over. And I remember when I had that predictions discussion a couple years ago with a couple of the guys from Geeks Worldwide, they had said that they wanted that to happen. Specifically, Kenny said that he wanted to see The Witcher 3 on Switch, and none of us thought it was even possible that it could happen, and it did. And, you know, we've had numerous things that, like, nobody thought they could happen, and they did. So, it's just one of those things. We're going to have to wait and see what happens. I think that it's, yeah, an unrealistic thing. It's unlikely, but it's not impossible. So, we'll just have to wait and see. This one, my next prediction, is going to be probably the most ridiculous one in many ways. Although it might not sound as ridiculous. There is another Batman game coming. They have been teasing it for a while. Specifically, was it? Yeah, it was Ubisoft. Ubisoft Montreal, I believe, was the one that's been teasing it. Because, actually, was it them? I can't remember. Anyway, the point is that one of the developers has been teasing that they could potentially that they were going to be revealing another Batman game having to do with the Court of Owls, and that it would probably be like a sequel to Origins. It seems like, which I think would be great. I think it would be cool to explore more of the earlier years for Batman, but saying that they will reveal it for Switch before they reveal it anywhere else, I'd say that's pretty unlikely. I don't even know that it will come to Switch. I mean, it really just depends on how motivated they are. I mean, they have to know that if they bring it to Switch, it's going to do well. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to happen. And I don't know. We'll have to wait and see with that. I do definitely put it as very unrealistic, very unlikely, but it's not impossible. Now this one, I actually have to admit, this one is probably even more ridiculous and unlikely, and it's really just because of EA. My prediction is EA is going to bring some of their big games over to Switch. Specifically some of their back catalog. And one of those things would be the Mass Effect Trilogy. This was another one of those things that Kenny from Geeks Worldwide was talking about a couple years ago when we had that predictions episode. And it's one of those things that's a no-brainer. There's no question they could get it running on Switch, and it would run probably pretty well. They're probably never going to do it, because EA is being a jerk about all this, and they're just... I don't understand them. I really don't understand them. The Switch has sold so well, and yet they're refusing to bring over any of their big games. I mean, yeah, they brought over FIFA, but it didn't do well because it was, I mean, you know, the first one, what was that, FIFA 18? Yeah, FIFA 18 they brought over. It was a gimped version of the game. And then when they did FIFA 19, it was like basically the previous year's game. They didn't do anything to it. Or, you know, they might have updated the roster and that was about it. And then they wonder why things don't sell well. It's like there's so many games they could bring over that would sell really well. But anyway, going on with the rest of that, the EA games they could bring over, Dead Space Trilogy. That's another one that, like, it's unrealistic because of EA, but it's one that would do really well probably, and I'm sure that people would buy it without question. It's just a matter of EA being not EA. One game that I think would be the most likely if EA was going to bring something over just because it probably wouldn't do very well, and then they, you know, say, oh, well, this is why we don't bring games over, is one that I've been wanting, which is Mirror's Edge Catalyst. I love that game. I know it got panned pretty much. I mean, like, okay, I guess it maybe didn't get panned per se, but, you know, it was getting, like, mediocre scores. Like, I think IGN probably gave it, like, a 68 or something like that. And the criticisms were reasonably valid, but I really love that game. I love the freedom of exploration. I love finding collectibles randomly throughout, and stopping to find those collectibles. I just thought it was a really fun game, and I would love to get it on Switch. I would buy it again without question. I know it would only run at 30 frames per second compared to the 60 I played on PC, but I would still happily buy it just because I think that it would be a great game to play little by little on the go. Now, next couple games, one of which is from Ubisoft, and that is Assassin's Creed Origins. Now, early on with the Switch, they did a streaming version in Japan only for Origins, and it didn't work otherwise, but I think that was more than just kind of testing the waters with it. I would say it's pretty unrealistic to think that they would actually take the time and effort to make it playable on the Switch. But I do think it's technically possible. It's just one of those things. It's a matter of motivation. They have to realize that, yeah, it would definitely sell well if they put it on Switch, or at least, it would sell well enough to where it could be justified, since the work that would have to be done is purely just a port. I mean, the game's made already. And it's a great game. It's a very great game. They could, even if they did it without the DLC, I mean, they probably would include the DLC, just because that's what they've been doing with the other Assassin's Creed games, but even if they didn't, it would still be a great game to have on Switch. I personally probably wouldn't buy it, only because I just finished playing the last of the DLC, what was that, yesterday? But it would be really cool to have it on Switch, and I do think that, as unrealistic as it is because of the visuals and everything, it's not impossible that it could happen. And this very last one, this is one that is a personal, a game that I love personally a great deal. I've talked about it plenty of times. I've used footage from it, from the PC version, and it's one that initially was basically their excuse was because the Switch is always on the go, this game wouldn't work with it. But that was when they were under Activision. And that's Destiny 2. Yes, it would definitely be a downgrade. It would be 30 frames per second, and there would be a lot of sacrifices made. Now, some of you would probably say, well, the game's way too big to put on Switch. And, I mean, for the most part, you'd probably be right. I would say that, yeah, it's true that it's a big game on consoles and on PC, especially on PC. Looking at my Steam version, I see that it's about 88 gigs. But keep in mind, that includes all different levels of textures, including all the 4K ones. It might even have 8K textures. I don't think so. I haven't looked into that. But it does have 4K textures, and those take up a lot of space. So it's definitely possible that they could probably cut the game in probably about half, I would think. Now, don't quote me on that. I could be completely wrong about that. I'm sure people who know more about this stuff would be able to say for sure. But, I mean, let's just say they decided to run the game at, we'll say 600p in handheld and 720p docked, they could probably pull it off. And it would definitely only run 30 frames per second. But even if they just wanted to put the free version out there initially to kind of test the waters, I mean, I would get the free version. I would try it out. I don't know how much I would play on Switch, but I could definitely see myself occasionally, when I'm away from home, bringing my Switch and turning it on and doing some grinding or whatever, working on some missions. I probably would not do Crucible with a 30 frames per second version, or at least not on the Switch. But at the same time, you know, Crucible was never that bad on PS4, so I don't know. It's a very unrealistic prediction. I mean, Bungie is no longer with Activision, so they don't have Activision whispering in their ears telling them no way, it's never going to happen. So if they really wanted to, I mean, I guarantee you a Switch version would do better than the Stadia version. There's no question about it. Because you already have a built-in, dedicated fan base. You wouldn't be relying on streaming. I mean, you could bring over existing Destiny 2 players, you could bring over Switch owners who haven't played Destiny 2, and they could even potentially convince people to buy multiple versions if, like, they liked playing on Switch and then they decided, oh well, I have a nice PC as well. Maybe I'll bring it over to PC on top of that, and then you get people with two different versions. Now, of course, some people are just going to go for the free version, but there's enough different types of cosmetic microtransactions that could convince people to, you know, put some money into it. And I mean, I've definitely put money into cosmetics in that game just because it's fun and because I love it so much. But yeah, I definitely think that Destiny 2, it's highly unlikely just because of, I mean, it is, you know, space restrictions. They definitely it would require that someone has, at the very least, a micro SD card, and it would have to, you know, be like a 32 gig micro SD card at least in order to fit all of that game data. But they also have like other stuff coming up, and I don't know how much they're going to add to the game each season. Of course, each season they'll also be taking some things out, so it'll kind of fluctuate. But nevertheless, I do think that it's possible, however unlikely, and it's my last unlikely prediction. So what about you guys? I want you to let me know down in the comments below, what are some things that you think we'll be seeing in the Nintendo Direct, whether it's February 27th we get it, or sometime in March. I mean, I would say it's pretty much guaranteed it's going to be by the end of March at the very least, because I think Nintendo's going forward trying to do one major Nintendo Direct per quarter, and since we haven't had one yet, it seems pretty likely that it'll be either February, I mean, you know, this last week of February or in March. But yeah, what are some things that you think you expect to see at the first major Nintendo Direct of 2020? What do you have? If you want, you can go ahead and break it down as realistic predictions, wishful predictions, and unrealistic/unlikely predictions, and let me know down in the comments below. Until next time, this has been the Frozen Gamer, and I'll talk to you later.